Hello, and welcome to episode 7 of the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. Rachael is a speaker, licensed counselor, and an overcomer. As Rachael is walking through her own journey of grief, she's challenging others to persevere and overcome their own circumstances. We pray that you'll be encouraged by this all-new podcast. Here now is your host, Rachael Flick.
Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. I'm so excited to share an incredible story with you. Tracey Lynn Russell joined me today to tell her story about her hopeful expectation of her marriage, followed by a devastating divorce. But then with an incredible story of redemption, she and her husband Mark remarried. Such a rare and unusual experience for most couples. But God was able to take their story and do the unexpected. Tracey is an award-winning writer for the Proverbs 31 Ministries, Lifeway Parent Life Magazine, Sharing Magazine, and Crosswalk.com. She recently launched her podcast, The Heart of the Story, and she's a co-founder of Free Ride 836, which is a nonprofit that raises money to build homes for orphans in Tanzania. She's a national conference speaker, and she's an incredible storyteller. You're not going to want to miss her story of redemption and hope today on the Hopecast. If you want to learn more about Tracey, you can find her at TraceyLynnRussell.com. Hi, you guys. I'm really excited to bring you this episode today of the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. And today I have the honor of interviewing Tracey Lynn Russell. Hi, Tracey. How are you today?
Hey, Rachael. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, I'm really excited. I just got exposed to your story recently, and I think that you have an incredible example of hope and resilience for people to hear and apply to their own lives.
Well, I'm so excited to talk to you about it, and that's the truth. You know, we do have hope, and I love the name of your podcast too, because that is, at the end of the day, that's what we have as believers. So.
Right. Yeah. Hope is the game changer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for people who haven't heard your story before, will you give us a little bit of an intro?
Yeah. So briefly, taking everybody back to the day I was married, I just thought I had arrived at my Christian destiny and saw just forever in my husband's eyes, and we were getting married. And I just was like so many women that was the day I had waited for my whole life since even being a little girl. And so even though I was a believer in Jesus, that person was going to so complete me on that day and love me and cherish me and make life wonderful. What I didn't expect was as we were driving away from the ceremony, I kind of looked over at Mark and I saw this strange look on his face. And, you know, Rachael, it was clouding up outside and it was clouding up relationally on him at that time. And so I just kind of shoved it down. You know, we're on the way to the honeymoon. And I just thought, this is feeling awkward with this man I just pledged forever for in front of 250 guests. And I'd never experienced that with him because he felt like my best friend. And so I couldn't understand why there was a disconnect. And the next day we boarded our honeymoon cruise and I finally got up the nerve to ask him. And I said, hey, what's going on? What's wrong? And he said, you know, I don't know if we should have been married. And at that point, Rachael,
right,
my entire life and my dreams and my hopes shattered within 24 hours of
absolutely
the biggest commitment I'd ever made in my heart. And I had finally, like probably so many of our listeners, you know, I'd had other relationships before, you know, had my heart broken in different relationships, but this time I was trying to do it God's way. And so I was putting him first. And so I thought, I'm guaranteed forever. I'm doing it God's way. And I'm going to marry this Christian man. I was young and 26 and all that. And so I felt like someone had punched me in the gut and I was just out there crying. And really, I didn't know in that moment how to really be stabilized as a believer when I got the worst chapter of my life. And that was not the story I signed up to live. That was not the story.
Yeah, right.
Was not how it was supposed to roll out. And so, you know, from there, it just started to progress. And we came home from the honeymoon and I tried, you know, everything that we normally do as women, trying to be more loving, be more of a woman, be the person that he think was attractive. And in that process, I found out I was pregnant.
Okay.
3 months into marriage and things kind of went from bad to worse. Now, at that point, I had planned on the 2-year plan, like every other woman,
Mhm.
of the bliss we were going to have together. And I was going to have this amazing career. And now I'm pregnant. And, I'm already realizing that the marriage is fractured. And even at that time, I knew I was in big trouble. And I had even called someone, a friend, to talk about possibly getting out of it because I knew it was so bad. And he said, yeah, you definitely have grounds for an annulment. I mean, you got into this and someone wasn't really committed. Definitely you can get annulled. We'll say the marriage wasn't consummated. And I had just found out I was pregnant. And so again, I lost that hope. I was like, oh my gosh, now not only did I ruin my life, I've just ruined this little person's life inside of me. And another dream just shattered, which is marriage, family, babies, the picket fence, the beautiful house. It was just really, really crumbling around me. But like so many women, I stuck in it. I was like, I'm going to be a wife and a mom, and I want to stick this out. And, you know, after my son was born, I realized that I was in big trouble. Like this was just not coming along. And so that's when someone offered me the book, Love Must Be Tough.
Okay, the book Love Must Be Tough. This is one of Dr. Dobson's books. I have heard of it, but I am not familiar with it. Can you give me and the listeners a little overview of what the core points of Love Must Be Tough are?
Yes. Before I tell you the core points, I want you to know that I had been to 7 counselors by
Oh
this
my
point.
gosh.
In 2.5 years of marriage, I had been to 7 counselors, church pastors, counselors, everybody, and nobody could help me because in that book, Love Must Be Tough, here was the revelation that I had never heard a godly Christian man say. And that is that the core issue in a marriage is respect. And when you lose respect, whether it be on the first day of the marriage, 10 years into the marriage, 20 years into the marriage, when you lose that measure of respect and contempt enters a marriage, you've started to lose everything. And that's not okay to live in that. And I had never heard anyone give me permission to finally say, this is not okay. And what he said was, by the way, if somebody wants to leave, let them leave. Stop begging, pleading, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, champion your own self-respect, and allow tough love to happen. Open the door, set the captive free, and stand your ground as a Christian, godly woman. And you deserve to be treated better than that. And I couldn't believe it because everybody was like, I mean, you just get beaten up when you're a Christian woman and you're looking for, you're in this kind of situation. Now, I will say it wasn't a typical situation, but it's, oh, if you just love them more. Oh, if you just be more. If you just are more romantic. If you just read this book and know how to love. And as women, we want to love that person when really we're called to respect our husbands. And, that's really interesting. We're not really called to unconditional love. We're called to unconditional respect. But we can't really respect another person if we don't respect ourselves. And I had allowed disrespect towards me and my son. And I finally had to stand my ground and say, enough is enough.
Okay. So talk a little bit about what disrespect might look like in the marriage, because I think that you're hitting on a huge pain point in the Christian community is, love more, look cuter, try harder. And what does that respect look like? Or if you are being disrespected as opposed to emotionally abused or cheated on, or these other things that are really more cut and dry, this black and white, like that's obviously a problem. What do you think that would look like, or what was that looking like between you and Mark?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I want to tell you that there was unfaithfulness going on at this time. I just didn't know it.
Okay.
So I was blind to that. And I really appreciate your question because I think we need to separate like marriage struggles with blatant red flags that I was too young to know were happening.
Right.
So here are blatant red flags. Lack of intimacy. There's not a normal intimacy going on with your husband. Blatant red flag. I don't want to be married. When your husband starts verbalizing, I don't want to be married, or I don't know if we should be married anymore, red flag. Number 3 is absence, like physical absence, being gone, being distracted, running away, not attending normal events that would mean something to someone. And I think 4 is, sometimes you'll see this too, is a spiritual bailout with a person that was once a Christian. Yeah, because he was like, I don't know if I'll never forget these words. So I ended up writing this letter to him and I just said it out loud. I said, I'm so sorry you don't want to, be married. And at this point, he had already told me, I don't want to be married. And P.S., I don't want to be a father either. So you're hearing this all the time. You're seeing it lived out. You're seeing the red flags of a car leaving late at night. You're seeing, phone calls that you don't know the people. You're in just like.
And you're looking back on those red flags and you're saying those were signs of infidelity.
I am, basically. And I'm telling you,
Yeah.
infidelity is one thing, but in this day and age, what I've seen is it could be porno. I mean, we didn't have that issue as much back then, but it could be pornography. I've seen that in women where there's an emotional affair, a relational thing going. There's a lot of things that cause a major disconnect in men. And it's at that point, I didn't recognize it. And now I see it. And it's when I run coaching groups with women, it's the same thing. They all start listening to each other and they all start going, oh, I see it. But when you're in it, you don't see it.
Yeah. Well, and you don't know what you don't know, right? And if you come in and you're idealistic, and I heard what you said, that you're like, I'm going to do this God's way. And so therefore I'm going to have an amazing marriage. And it's an if-then equation in our mind. And God actually doesn't promise us that.
Right. I know. But you know what? I bought it hook, line, and sinker. I wanted it so bad. I wanted, if I do A, then God's going to do B and I'm going to get C. And I think a lot of women, we sign up, we're going to be the perfect wife, the perfect mom, the perfect this, the perfect that, which PS is completely unrealistic. But we want that. And what's funny is I actually talked to Sean McDowell, who's an apologist, and he told me that we actually have prosperity theology in our relationships as Christian women. And I thought, boy, isn't that true? You know what I mean? And I bought it. And so that's the awful story going on in your head is you're so afraid because you're like, wait a minute, I'm trying to do all the right things and I'm getting, I'm not good at numbers. What am I getting? And I'm not getting C. Right. I'm getting an F is what I'm getting, Rachel. I'm getting an F.
Absolutely. Okay. So you're saying that you have now been able to kind of earmark some of the problems that if you have a lack of intimacy, their physical absence, that they're really just not engaging in family life. They're telling you they don't want to be there. They don't want to be a parent. They don't want to be married. And then that spiritual bailout.
Yeah. And, just that lack of connection, that emotional connection that women crave so much and that we all want on such a deep level. When there's just this huge absence, we feel it. We're so intuitive. We know when it's not there and when it's not there. And by the way, I want to delineate. This is not like my husband didn't show up late for dinner and I'm mad and I feel disrespected. This is like, my husband doesn't want to come to Christmas because he wants to hang out with his friends at a bar. You know what I mean? So I want to be really careful that women aren't hearing me say, like, the first time he disrespects me, I'm going to stand my ground. This was like really, this is very, very classic when you have a really dysfunctional marriage. These are the signs.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that in this gray zone, right, where you had 7 counselors and none of them gave you permission to have boundaries in your marriage or to expect respect in return from your husband. I really like the tool FIT, frequency, intensity, and type. So the type would be like, what is happening? So he's not there. The intensity would be, he's not there at Christmas so that he can go hang out at a bar. And the frequency is, how often is he checking out, right? And that kind of helps to scale that gray area from, oh, I don't like this and this is hard, to, wow, this is really dysfunctional and I need to set up some different boundaries and expectations in this relationship.
Right. And I really want to be empathetic to Christian women right now, because what I've seen is that we err on the other side, is that our hearts are so so tied up in that marriage relationship with good reason. Our children are tied to it. Our financial security is tied to it. Our future, our faith. It is the hallmark cornerstone, we believe, of our whole life. And in some ways, it is. And yet, that awful story, what I found out, is what keeps women stuck. Like, if my own husband doesn't love me, I've got to get him to love me. Or if I step away from this, I'm going to have nothing. Or God is punishing me for this. I did something wrong. And I think women take this on, and I took it on.
Yeah.
And until I said no more, I couldn't break free of it. I couldn't get unstuck.
Mm.
And so that's what the book really did for me. Was it was very empowering. It gave me permission to say, here's the stopping point. And by the way, we didn't have boundaries books back then. I just had
Henry Cloud and John Townsend. Oh my God.
didn't have them yet, but but there was a stopping point and there was a limit. And I just thought it was incredibly freeing. I felt free. I felt released. And honestly, I never have felt closer to God than the day that I said goodbye to my husband and said, I finally stopped the begging, pleading, and trying to hold on. And I opened that door. And I think it's an act of faith.
Okay.
Because I basically bet the house on God. I just said, you know what? I'm all in with you, and I can't fix this one anymore. And I felt relief. I finally felt relief when he left, because
that's surrender.
Right. That's surrender. And I think there's not a more painful place for a woman than to be in a marriage where someone doesn't want to be married and is verbalizing that and telling you that. It's so painful. Even though we want to grab on tighter, when you finally open your hands and open your heart to God and let go, there's freedom there. And so that was a good place to be.
When you opened up your hands, was he asking to leave? Was he saying, I want a divorce at that point, when you just said, I'm no longer going to try to control this and be the perfect wife and fix this relationship?
No, at first he will tell you, now remember, this is many years ago, but he will tell you he felt relieved too. And he thought, oh, great, I'm going to go live on my friend's couch and surf for a while. And this is great, but I remember him looking at.
Did you ask for separation?
I did. And he said, Tracey, he said, I know what it would take to save our marriage, and I'd have to become a Christian, and I'm not going to do that.
Wow.
So sorry, but I'm sorry this worked out like this, but goodbye. And I think he was kind of hoping that it would just kind of go away magically, and I would just kind of divorce him and walk off. But I really trusted God to show me what to do at that point. And I think, that's when the story started changing for him once that door opened.
Well, and if I remember correctly from an interview that I listened to, Mark said that he felt like he had grown up in the church and had accepted Christ at a young age, but that he'd never received the Lord as the boss of his life. He'd never put him on the throne of his heart. And so when he said, I would have to become a Christian and I'm not willing to do that, what did that look like for him?
Yeah, I think that meant all in, whole heart surrender. And I do believe, Rachael, now I'm looking back on this story 26 years later. And so I see what many people or Christians struggle with is they've said a salvation prayer in their life. And so he would have technically met the mark of being a Christian, but we run up against these idols or obstacles or places we don't want to give up. And they start to cause us relational pain and everything. And it's kind of it's a tipping point. And I think he was at that tipping point where God was like, will you serve me, or are you going to serve yourself and this way of life? And at that point, he wasn't ready, but God has a way of making people ready. When we surrender our lives as Christian women, we open the door and we trust God. He's got the story. It's not the end of the story. So
it's not the end of the story. It's easy to feel like in that moment of crisis and pain that our life is over. And you talked about how all of your hopes and dreams had been shattered and your white picket fence. And so you are there with your son, and he's how old at this point?
Oh my goodness. So I was, let's see, it was from basically 1 year old, we're separated.
Okay.
As we're separated. We're trying to work things out. But, in the process of being separated, I did find out that he had been unfaithful. And with that, I burned with anger. I was so angry that I thought, I'll never forget the day. It was like Valentine's Day. And I said, I am so sorry you chose to do that. And he confessed to me and told me and was crying. And he was like, I was so wrong. I was like, that is very unfortunate that you made that decision. However, I told you if you were unfaithful, it's over and we're getting a divorce. And I really don't want to be a single mom, but I don't want to be married to you ever again. I was like a venomous snake. I was so mad. And I got into that angry phase at that point because that I didn't see it coming. Now I see it coming, but at that point I didn't see it. And so God was really going to have to kind of work that whole situation through in my life. And to be honest, I had some issues that I needed to work through. And so that was pretty much where we were. And the funny, ironic part about it is when we were divorced, Mark found a group of men that rallied around him. He finally got tricked into going to a Bible study. And he said he just showed up. And the first time he heard a man share his story authentically about a similar struggle, Mark came to Christ. Wholehearted surrender in the Bible study. And all of these men knew our struggle and rallied around him and were like, Mark, we're going to disciple you and make you the man God designed you to be, not necessarily to remarry to Tracey, although I'm sure they would have loved that to have been the story, but just to reconcile to God. And, Mark will tell you at that point, he finally felt peace because here's the truth, Rachel, men that are in that stage or women are miserable. Like it is miserable to be looking in other places for love. It is miserable to be out at bars, behaving like you're in college when you're married with a kid. And know the shame of that and know that you feel stuck and they are just going against everything they believe in. But it's like the devil is playing that trick in their mind, like, hey, you've already messed up. There's no hope. Just keep going. Just keep messing up. Never turn back. And the shame and the guilt on men is just, it's the oldest trick in the book. And for many it works, but God sent his people in, to really minister to Mark. And I'm so grateful for that. I just couldn't receive it at the time.
Well, and I think that that's really important to honor the anger of being betrayed, because there is no greater betrayal in marriage than to defy your vows to one another that you will be faithful only to each other for the rest of your life. And I have seen in the Christian culture growing up in the church that while men are valid in feeling anger, women don't really get permission to experience or process their anger. And I think that that is a place where we can get stuck and not progress in our healing on the path to resilience, is because we don't really have permission and we don't have techniques to work through that anger. And so that bitterness just grows. And then we just, root down into there and we get stuck. So do you remember anything that you did that helped you work through your anger of that betrayal?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think back on that girl that I was, and I was just so mad and so felt betrayed even by God, because here we have this masculine God, right? And here your mind is whirling like, can I even trust God? Can I even, this person I love that this is male that was supposed to watch out for me didn't. Maybe he's not. I don't even trust myself anymore to make the right decision.
Yes.
So God is so faithful when we're honest in our anger, Rachel. Like he can take it. He is just really good to be there. And he sent me a godly woman out of the blue. I saw this woman one day at church and we had known each other from a Bible study. And she said, hey, I'm doing this Bible study. I'd love for you to come. And, I know you're divorced, but if you ever want to get remarried, it would be a great thing for you to do. And at that point, I was young and I had a kid. I was like, oh, I want to get married again. I want to start dating. I want that life. I am going to get that life that got robbed from me back. And so she tricked me into going to this Bible study. It was called Search for Significance. And
okay.
And so at this point in my life, and I know we've heard this a lot in the Christian culture, but the fact that we actually believe lies and truth, discerning lies and truth in our mind and getting unstuck from the awful story, what I had to learn as a believer, regardless of whether I went back with Mark or not, I didn't have that skill. So For example, I had lots of stuck points in my mind running through, like, people never change. The only way to show my self-respect is to be a divorced woman, and my anger empowers me and makes me strong. But here's what I had to learn: the truth. My purpose for my life is intact, whether other people discourage me or disgrace me with their actions. My purpose and God's plan for my life is intact, even when other people fail me to love me the way I want them to. And so I had never even thought that I was being manipulated and I was falling for lies. I didn't know how that discernment process, but I literally had to write out different statements and get unstuck from a lot of the lies. And, anger feels good. It's really great for a while. But man, you want to talk about miserable? Stay angry. And I remember sitting at a game one time, and I was sitting next to this lady, and I was like, I hate my ex-husband. He's such a jerk. He was, screwed me over, all this stuff. And she was like, me too. And she was telling me hers. And I'm like, did you just get divorced? And she said, no, it was 18 years ago.
Whoa. Okay. Yeah, that would be stuck. That would absolutely be stuck in the bitterness.
And I thought, oh my goodness, Lord, I need your grace to heal from this too. Just because I empower myself with this anger, I need something more than this too. Like, you're going to have to move me through. And so again, so faithful, Rachael. Like, God answers the prayers of his people. And while I was angry, I was still pouring my heart out. I was still praying at night, like, Lord, show me, help me see. And he would give me so many tangible signs. And I think that's something I want to reach out to women, because sometimes when we see everything we don't have, we don't see what we do have. And God was giving me little signs everywhere, speaking into my life, and just giving me tangible little signs of hope. And so I would see those as almost like little love letters he was writing me. I mean, just the simplest little things every day.
Do you remember any examples?
I have really cool examples.
Okay.
Well, I'll ask you, do you want to hear about a message that was stuck in a telephone, or me trying to sell my wedding dress at a garage sale?
Oh, I want to hear the wedding dress story.
Okay, so I was really ticked off. I decided I am going to garage sale every single wedding gift that I ever received, including all of my furniture, everything I owned. And here I am, this single mom with my little beautiful son, dragging all these things out, just so angry and mad and discouraged. And, I felt like I had a banner out in front of my house. I hung my wedding dress up. It's flapping in the breeze, and I felt like it was just a big sign to everybody. Here's the single mom, the divorcee, come get all of her stuff for a quarter. And, and I was so mad. And all of a sudden a car drove by, and the car door flies open, and it's one of my dearest friends. And she runs through the crowd, who was already starting to buy my stuff. And she said, Tracey Russell, what in the world are you doing? And she grabbed my wedding dress and grabbed me by the arm and pulled me inside. And I was like, Deb, it's over. It's over for me. I'm selling the wedding dress. And she was like, no way. She was like, hey, this may not mean something to you right now, but God can change the story. Like, God can save. You never know if you'll have future children. You never know. I'm not letting you sell it. And she just literally grabbed it and put it back in my closet. And I walked back out there, and she was like, now goodbye. And I'm not buying your stuff. So she leaves, but I was stood there as that single mom, so desperate that day, just thinking, in my mind, the enemy was saying, everything you have is just worth a quarter. But God was like, but I'm saving hope for you. And Rachael, that wedding dress is in a beautiful box right now that says memories last forever. What I didn't know is I wasn't going to have one son. I have 3 beautiful sons, and I have a little girl, and that dress will be for her one day. And God is so faithful to change and rewrite the story when we trust him. And he's sending these little signs, and he's trying to tell us that he's in our everyday moments. There's not a single mom that he's not watching and his eyes aren't on her. There's not a single woman or man that's not angry and mad right now that God's not. And I love you, and I'm going to be with you. I'm never going to leave you. I'm never going to forsake you. And when the vows break, and those 2 things are so pivotal, that I will forsake all others and I'll love you till the day I die. I think it's forsake all others and I'll never leave you. God is that first love for us. And I think that's what I had to latch onto really for the first time in my life, was latching on to my first love, which was Jesus. And really, I can't love anybody else really well unless I know I'm totally whole and complete being loved by him. Then it comes out of the overflow. So that's where I really was at that stage. And I had to learn how to be in that first love relationship with him, regardless of a man.
You know, this conversation we've been having is amazing. And I love how you're drilling down on identity, and that if you are not comfortable, if you are not certain in your identity without someone else's love, that you aren't bringing your whole self to your marriage. And there's no way that your spouse can ever fill that space for you that was created only for Jesus. So on that next episode, I want to talk to you about the good advice that you guys received, and also maybe some of the bad advice that you received, because I've noticed that when you're in a crisis, who advises you and what they say can make or break the outcome of your decision making.
Yeah, I love that topic. And I definitely want to talk to you about that. And also just knowing that, you know, I don't offer advice, but I do know the word of God, and God has his truths that are firm and steadfast, no matter what situation we're in. So I'll look forward to that conversation, Rachael.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this week's episode of the Hopecast. You will not want to miss this follow-up interview with Tracey next week. Come and join us for the Hopecast with Rachael Flick.
You've been listening to the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. To find out more, go to rachaelflick.com. While there, you can discover more information about all the platforms that this podcast is on. Also, be sure to click on the social media icons at the top of the page, and you will be directed to Rachael's social media sites. While you're online, you can book Rachael for your next speaking engagement. Her inspiring message will be sure to engage and touch the heart of your audience at your next conference, church event, or business function. Go to rachaelflick.com to book her today. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time for another edition of the Hopecast with Rachael Flick.